we've got a couple of different questions, both in the YouTube chat as well as one that was sent to me via Twitter. There's a couple of different questions. We can't get to all of them. I don't think we're running a little low on time. I guess we will go with this one, and I'll start with you, Scott. One of the commenters in the YouTube chat asked about PJ Dawson and if he will ever get a chance. And this will segue nicely into our next fan question. But your thoughts on PJ Dawson? Do you think he deserves a chance? Is this kind of one of those Carlos Dunlap isn't practicing the right way and it's hindering the team, or is he just not good enough?
I mean, he was given a pretty high – I know he fell to the end of the third round, but he was given a pretty high grade. So you would think, coming out of college, obviously, multiple people thought he was a pretty good player. He was, for as little as experience as he had at linebacker, I think he played something like wide receiver when he went to the junior college, transferred to TCU, was kind of new to the linebacker position, was, very good playmaker. Bengals drafted him, and the report seemed to be that he isn't as disciplined as they want him to be. He's kind of more of a freelancer, kind of a guy who's just going to go make a play and not so much worried about the scheme says I stand here. Instead, I'm getting out of position. But that being said, the one discouraging thing I think is when they put him on the practice squad, so they had to put him on waivers. No one picked him up to add him to their active roster. So that kind of makes you think, okay, obviously maybe there's something that, as fans, we aren't seeing day to day, that other teams are seeing that are looking a little differently. So that's the one discouraging thing, although I still have hope for him just because I was really high on him when they drafted him when he was a prospect, because when you watch his game tape, preseason and college, granted, that's obviously not NFL, typical, week 1 through 17 is not a regular season game. But when you watch him play, he does make plays. He is a good player, and it kind of reminds me of he might be taking the Vincent Ray route where he was great. He was undrafted, but his first 2 years he really didn't play very much. He got in, I think, maybe 3 games his first year, and got in more second year, but really didn't contribute much. Was more of a bench warmer, special teams kind of, we'll throw you in and just kind of here and there. But then his third year really took off, really had a chance to become a contributor, gotten much more regularly. Once he kind of got in the scheme, the Bengals were like, yep, this is a guy we want. So, the hopeful thing for PJ Dawson and for people who would like to see him get a chance is maybe he's taken that route that, okay, he's had his couple years to kind of get in the system, to make the coaches say, okay, we really think this is our guy. We're ready to go forward with him. So I think this is going to be his make and break year. If he doesn't get on the field much in if he starts out low on the depth chart, doesn't get a chance in training camp, I think he's probably done as far as the Bengals are concerned. I'm not ready to write him off yet, just because they do have a track record of guys taking a slower route. I think Connor had mentioned Drake Kirkpatrick earlier. I mean, gosh, he's first round pick, and I think he was 3 years before he became a starter. So there's still a chance. Until he's officially off the roster, I'm still kind of – there's a few guys like him and Jake Kumara who I'm expecting someday.
Yeah. And I agree with you. I think that PJ Dawson was probably my favorite pick of that draft class. I had high hopes for him. Very instinctual player, made a lot of good plays at TCU when he was in college. There was, I don't want to say character concerns, but there was just some dumb young kid type of actions on his part that, some coaches didn't like in his past. I think he slept through meetings and, other stuff like that. And I think some of that has trickled over to the Bengals. And that's probably why he hasn't seen too much time. But, and Connor, it's kind of a shame with the 6-9-1 record last year. The Bengals didn't give a lot of these guys chances as the year wore on. You would think once the season was kind of out of control and they were out of contention that, they would kind of see kind of what they did in 2010. They would see what they got out of what they have out of some of these young players. What are your thoughts on PJ Dawson going forward?
I mean, first of all, really quick, I disagree in that sense in that I think a lot of guys did get to play later on the season. Nick Vigil played a lot in nickel packages. Darquez Denard, Josh Shaw both got snaps. You saw Well, I mean, the Bengals tried everything on the defensive line, especially in nickel, with like they re-signed Wallace Gilbert because they had played, Will Clark, Marcus Hunt, all these guys inside and outside. They still couldn't get any sort of a pass rush. Deshaun Williams saw some late snaps late in the season, and granted, it wasn't probably as much as many fans would hope for, but even on offense, you have Jake Fisher, Cody Core, and Tyler Boyd getting snaps. So I disagree on that and from that point. But in terms of PJ Dawson, I mean, let me just read you his scouting profile because all the goods, we all know he was a good player in college, but weaknesses, there's certain things about football or whatever, but then the non-football scouts are, quote, very worried about his personal character and say he's not beloved within the program. Questions have been raised about his commitment to the process, and then just straight up not a film studier. An AFC West regional scout. He's an early round player without any question, but you don't have to dig around very deep or very long to realize that his personal character is going to be a major issue for some teams. My grade will be 2 rounds later than just the talent grade. It has to be factored in. And then another scout, just to be fair, says, I'll make sure he stays alive in our building because he's just that good. So I don't think that it's... And people are going to say the Bengals are being unfair by not letting him play. But I mean, if a guy's not studying film, which, if he's not studying film, none of us know whether he is or not. But it's very easy for fans, I think, to make assumptions of what a guy is or isn't doing. If he's not studying film, I don't think he should be on the field. I don't think most fans who understand the game would think that a guy should be on the field if he really isn't studying. That's your job. What else are you doing for the 6 days between your games? So, I mean, I don't know. I hope he gets a chance. I hope he earns that chance. I don't think the Bengals should just say, okay, well, we drafted this guy in the 3rd round, and whatever that draft was. Yeah, let's put him on the field. I think if he earns his chance, he earns his chance. And that's why you see teams like the Patriots, and fans always are like, oh, well, watch this guy go to the Patriots and become a great player. The Bengals are one of those teams that really is able to get a lot out of guys who don't seem to have a lot left to give. Adam Jones has been retread and comes to Cincinnati and has a great career. Terrence Newman is like 35 when he's still making plays for the Bengals, and then you have guys like Burfict who fall completely out of the draft because of concerns that scare scouts and teams, and now he's a superstar. And I mean, there's still, obviously he's not perfect, but if PJ Dawson isn't watching film, I mean, it's hard for me to, and again, the Bengals he passed through waivers, didn't get claimed by a single team last year. So teams are very, very scared of that, or else someone would have claimed him. Like 1 of 31 teams would have claimed him if teams weren't afraid of that. So I think it's very, very, very naive of fans to just think that, oh, well, this guy got drafted, how he should play. Because we really don't know anything going on behind the scenes. And I'm sure if the Bengals beat writers had the permission or knew what was going on, that they would say that. I don't think the Bengals are trying to cover that up or anything like that. I think that if someone saw, Paul Dawson's sleeping in his car while everyone else is at practice, which again, that's completely made up. No one say that. It's just an example. But if something like that's going on, I don't think any fan would actually want him to play. I think it's just right now, okay, well, we drafted him high and he's made a couple of plays in the preseason, so let's see him play. But in all reality, none of us really, really know what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel you. And obviously, coaches want to see players do things the right way.
Well, I also don't think it's just them trying to make an example. I think if he isn't studying film, he's not going to be good in a game. If you have concerns with a freelancer, I mean, if a guy's not watching film and he's a guy who's labeled as a freelancer, he's going to mess up on at least one play in the game.
Right, and we don't know if that is for sure the case. That was the college tag on him, and we don't know. We've heard a couple little things, maybe that missing meetings and stuff like that. I do agree with both of you. It is a little concerning about him clearing waivers, after being such a talented college player. The one thing I can say is just I hope that after being released and spending time on a practice squad with a team, I hope that's kind of a gut check, a reality check for the guy. If he isn't studying the right way, if he isn't preparing the right way, I think we all can agree the talent's there. Especially when you look at his college tape, he can do a lot of different things that could help the Bengals out. But if he's not prepping the right way, and not just not going about it the right way, but it's not going about it the right way, and it's now affecting him on the field as a pro player. That's a different designation there. Then obviously, the Bengals obviously know something we don't about the situation. But at some point, I would like to see him get some extensive time and kind of at least see what you got from him. I mean, you spent a 3rd round pick on him. He was a talented college guy. At least see if he can hold his water as some sort of contributor on the Bengals defense. Let's close up with this one very interesting tweet I received from Andrew Wayne Torres. He's at Cincy's very own. He said, "Can I have your opinion on my first mock draft? Thanks." Now I know I'm pretty familiar with a handful of. He's got a 5-round mock, and obviously I'm kind of familiar. I'm pretty familiar with about, and he did things with the compensatory picks; those were included there. So, in a 5-round mock, we're looking at 7 picks. I would say, personally speaking, I know quite a bit about maybe 4 of the picks. But I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on this, both player and position-wise, okay? So, Scott, I'll start with you again. Here's the rundown, okay? 5-round mock, 7 picks. Number 1 at number 9 overall, Reuben Foster, linebacker out of Alabama. 2nd round, Marcus Williams, safety out of Utah. Round 3, Tyus Bowser, edge rusher out of Houston. Number 4, and this one's round 4, the first pick in round 4, and this one's pretty interesting to me. Kareem Hunt, the running back out of Toledo. And then the other 2 picks in the 4th round, Josh Reynolds, wide receiver from Texas A&M. Terrell Basham, defensive end out of Ohio. And then another guy I know pretty well just from being more of a local player, DeMonte Kazee, cornerback out of San Diego State. Any thoughts on that? Either the certain players that stick out to you, value, and how this particular person prioritized positions for the Bengals?
Well, it was definitely a defense-heavy draft with the top 3 picks all being defensive end, or not defensive end, but on the defensive side of the ball. One thing I thought was kind of interesting was I am a huge fan of Jamal Adams, the safety from LSU, who I don't think is there at number 1. But that being said, it was seeing Marcus Williams in the 2nd round is interesting. I think Marcus Williams, and I still need to do my research on draft stuff. Thankfully, I have a couple more months before the draft. I think he's more of a free safety. I think he had a ton of interceptions the last couple years, which I would not be opposed to. I thought the second safeties were better in Cincinnati when we had Nelson at free safety and Iloka could play up a little more. It seemed like this year, because Sean Williams had some coverage issues, especially early in the season, they just were out of position a little bit. If Marcus Williams was to be a free safety, kind of replacing what we had with Reggie Nelson, we could put Iloka back up a little closer to the line. I'd have no objection to that. The other thing I thought, just 2 other points that were interesting. Kareem Hunt seemed like an interesting one. I think he goes like 5'10", 208, and he's a pretty good receiver. So he's kind of a Giovanni Bernard.
Right.
So it kind of makes you want and you could see, okay, if Rex Burkhead's leaving, but I'm not sure if they use a 4th round pick on a backup for Gio since they just re-signed Gio. Plus with Hill there. Granted, Hill may only be there another year, but I do think that'd be, unless they see something in, a way they could utilize both Gio and Hunt at the same time. But the one that I thought was the most interesting was Terrell Basham, the defensive end from another guy from the MAC, which the Bengals don't tend to draft too much from the MAC, but he's kind of a guy that I've seen kind of rated everywhere from as high as the 2nd to down to the 4th or 5th. And part of it is because he is from the MAC, but he was Defensive Player of the Year. He seems to be a guy who gets a lot of pressure, really gets at the quarterback. The biggest knock on him just seems to be that he plays in the MAC. But, you get good guys from everywhere. And Jason Taylor, who's a Hall of Fame caliber guy, I think he went to Akron. So
He just made the
clearly,
Hall of Fame.
Yeah, it's like what. Not saying that that this kid from OU would make the Hall of Fame, but still, that there's not to say okay, because you see guys from like Troy and Kutztown State and these places who end up being really good players. So I don't think that just because he's from the MAC, there's a reason to knock him, but. He's what the Bengals need. They need a pass rusher. They need a defensive end, and he seems big enough that he could play more than just third down. So without knowing the guys in as much detail as I think we'll know in April, other than the Hunt pick, which was kind of interesting, and obviously I don't know all the reasoning behind why the picks were made, I thought it was very interesting. Bengals have a strong defense, making it stronger, obviously. I think no offensive line might be the one concern, but that depends on what they do in free agency. But anyway, that's my 3 cents.
Okay, not 2, 3 cents. Connor, again, just real quick recap: 5-round mock draft from.
I got it pulled up.
Okay, go for it.
So I'll go pick by pick. Reuben Foster. I've kind of made my opinion known. I think linebacker is a position where you can get later in the draft. The Bengals don't really seem to draft it high. And you look, and to me, I just don't think that you draft a linebacker in the first round unless you believe that Vontaze Burfict isn't in the team's future plans. They don't play the same. They play the same position in nickel packages, so it really wouldn't make sense to have a guy like Foster trying to play weak side because he's a middle linebacker in nickel. So. And maybe I screwed that one up, but I mean that's just my personal opinion. Safety in the second, I don't hate it, but I think that you could get a better guy. I think you have to get an edge player in the first 2 rounds. I would hope in the first round. Like I said before, talk about Charlton, Solomon Thomas, the 2 guys I think the team will take. I guess I won't really go super into it down the whole list. What I'll say a couple of things. Number 1, mock drafts at this point really should just be taken with a grain of salt because none of us know what happens in free agency. Number 2, I think that a lot of fans are thinking kicker. Granted, there wasn't a kicker in this mock draft. I think a lot of people are mock drafting kicker 10 rounds before he's going to get taken. The Bengals aren't going to take a kicker in the 4th round. I think we all learned that last year. Maybe they take one in the 6th or 7th. I would guess they don't. Right. Because like it or not, there's college kickers out there you can just get undrafted nowadays. So I don't really see a need to take a kicker in the draft unless you think there's a guy there. And granted, the team has a lot of picks this year, so maybe they do. Another observation I have: people are taking running backs really high. I don't know what the team's plans are for Jeremy Hill. I think it's a pretty big assumption to assume that the team is going to take a running back high. That being said, if Burkhead's gone and I think if Burkhead leaves, you take a guy maybe in the 5th round to replace him. But what's the point in drafting a guy high only to see Jeremy Hill have his comeback year? And Grant, we really don't know what happens. But if you do that, you're kind of writing your own destiny and limiting possibilities, I think, just from my own perspective. And then finally, what I'll say is I'll just give you one sleeper guy who I really like. Safety, if we're going to go safety, Obi Melifonwu from UConn. He gets the comp of George Iloka being a 6'4", 219-pound safety, really long, really tall, built in that mold, which, if he falls around 4 or 5, he's one of those guys where you look at his physical measurables and he's a guy that you just have to take there because I don't think the team needs a safety at all. I think the team could go the whole draft without taking a safety. But if you have a guy like that with those physical attributes, you even read his draft profile and it kind of says the same thing. Elite size, premium athletic traits that show up. They're saying he's going to have a major combine where he just blows the charts off. Iloka was kind of the same type of player, and the Bengals took him in the 5th round. So if he lasts that long, even though you have Deron Smith, I don't know. I think you take him and Clayton Fedulum is definitely an expendable player, even though I like him. He's kind of one of my boys on the team. But there's going to be guys. I think my last observation, guys are going to become expendable on this team with 11 players in the draft. Clayton Fetchel, and maybe even Alex Erickson after last year. If you get a guy like Benny Cunningham in free agency, who's kind of one of my boys, made a ton of plays for the Rams, really good return man, and he's kind of a Rex Burkhead type player out of the backfield. You get one of those guys, and there's players that become expendable, and you cut the loose weight. And I like Erickson, I like Fedgelum, I hope they both stay. But when you look at the team right now, they have a lot of players, and they have a lot of picks, and some guys are going to end up getting cut. Granted, they're probably not going to re-sign a lot of guys that are on the free agency list, so to speak, but that there's still going to be guys who are, like Marcus. What do you do with Marcus Hardison when he comes back? What do you do with Brandon Thompson next year? A lot of guys where it's going to be an interesting thing to get into.
Yeah, and again, kudos to Andrew Wayne Torres for this mock draft. To me, I like some picks. I love a couple, and there's maybe a couple things I don't like. Well, really only one thing I would swap. So, to me, I agree with you to a certain extent, Connor. I think Reuben Foster and Vontaze Burfict are very similar players, but I think those two next to each other, if you can find a way to make them play next to each other, that is that would be a good thing for this defense, obviously. And then you get Andrew Billings back up front, and all of a sudden some things might be remedied that were issues last year. I really like the Kareem Hunt pick, and he had almost 1,900 yards from scrimmage last year with Toledo. I think he had 11 or 12 total touchdowns, so he's a very exciting player. He's actually a little bit, according to his profile, Scott, he's a little bit bigger than you had. He stands as, according to Sports Reference in college football, he is 6 foot 225. So he's a little bigger, okay. But he may move. Well, he may, and you know what? He moves though, and his skill set is like that of someone who is a little lighter. And
but I think too, we're also in the era where pre-combine, we don't have a lot of perfect measurements. So I forget if I was on CBS Sports or what side I was on that gave me the 5'10", 208.
Right.
But yeah, if he's 225 versus 208, it's a heck of
it is. But
difference.
Who knows? He could weigh in somewhere at 215. You know what I mean? So yeah. I'll tell you the thing. The pick I like the most is this DeMonte Kazee cornerback in the 5th round from San Diego State. That kid had 15 interceptions over the past 2 seasons, 8 last year, 7 the year before. He just knows how to play. He's small. He's only about 175, 180 pounds, but he knows how to play, and he really reminds me of the kid out of Vanderbilt. His name escapes me right now. He's a slot corner. He played for the Packers and played for the Chargers this last season. I can't think of his name for some reason, but he just knows how to make plays. He knows how to get in the right position. Very, very exciting guy. He's got some speed, but I think especially if the Bengals are facing losing Dre Kirkpatrick, whatever's going to happen with Adam Jones happens. I think obviously corners are at a premium in the NFL. Even though Andrew waited till the 5th round to take one, I still think this kid has a good future in the NFL. I really like him, and I really like the Hunt pick. My main issue with it, I don't see safety in the second. The Bengals used last offseason to re-sign George Aloka. They gave Sean Williams an extension, and Williams started off slow but ended up playing well down the stretch. Kind of the same with Aloka as well. So I just don't see safety being a 2nd-round pick. What I would do is I would then I wouldn't mind if a safety was maybe if he had switched the Josh Reynolds, wide receiver of Texas A&M, that 2nd pick in the 4th round, not that player, but the position wide receiver, and move that up into the 2nd round. I would be happy with that. I think the Bengals need a lot of help on offense. I really do. And that goes back to what we talked about with the Falcons and all of the weapons they have. Mohamed Sanu, Taylor Gabriel, Julio Jones, the 2 running backs. There was a lot to defend for other teams that played Atlanta this year, and I think that bodes well. Is that a fair statement, Scott?
Yeah, and one thing I was thinking, you mentioned DeMonte Kazee being small, and I don't know if he's height small too. But I remember when the first thing that popped in my mind was Brandon Boykin. I think he came out of Georgia. Wasn't that kind of the knock on him that, hey, he's a great player, but he's just way too small? And he's had a pretty productive. Yeah. So if this guy's anything like him, I mean, yeah, I would have no objection to, especially getting 15 picks.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, eight last season, 7 the year before. I'm trying. I wish I had that. I'm trying to pull up the kid's name. I'm thinking of who is the cornerback that I'm thinking of. Casey Hayward. That's the guy I'm thinking of. Yeah. Very, very reminiscent. Again, Hayward wasn't the fastest guy. Wasn't, the most athletic, but somehow he just knows how to make a ton of plays. And I kind of see, and Hayward was a guy, I think he went in the 2nd or 3rd round. He wasn't, a highly elite known prospect, but he's been, like Boykin, like you said, has made a career out of creating turnovers and just being in the right spot, and knows how to play defense. And I think that's one of, as weird as it is to say that a 5th round pick and the last pick in Andrew's mock is my favorite pick. That's my favorite pick. What's your favorite pick in that mock? I'm going to go with the guy from OU, and I should clarify, in Ohio, OU is Ohio University, not Oklahoma. Yeah. When I'm saying OU, I mean the Bobcats. So the defensive end, because everything I've read on him, I haven't had a chance to watch him yet, but from what I've read, it seems very promising. And if your biggest knock is just you're at a small school, I don't see that as much of a knock. I remember last year there was a guy who was kind of high on, Matt Juden, who I can't remember where he played. It was one of these little dinky schools, like a Grand Valley State or something, like a little school like that, who was just a very good, a man among boys. That was a good pass rusher, could get in the quarterback, got drafted late. And I think had for as late as he got drafted, I thought he had a decent first year. But that is actually, this reminds me of a question we had in the YouTube chat about, screw this guy's name up horribly. I'll just say that the center from LSU, Ethan, Pocic. Oh yeah. Pocic or something. Yeah.
But the question, I thought it was a pretty interesting one, if he's too tall to play center. So I had to look him up because I wasn't sure exactly how tall he is. That he has him listed pre-combine at 6'7", which is a heck of a tall center. So I was kind of wondering, and I looked up some of the better centers out today to see, okay, at what point do they kind of stop? Because I know there are some pretty tall ones. They're not all the squatty 6'1" guys. So guys like Mangold and Alex Mack are both 6'4". Some other guys who were pretty good before them, Andre Grud and Kevin Mawai, were both 6'4". So I think you can have some height and play center, and obviously the SEC is a good conference. It worked for him in the SEC. But I thought, it's a pretty interesting question, because especially interior line, you're talking about leverage, you're talking about going against, that's where you're a little shorter, squattier, stronger. You're really getting that push and leverage, and yeah, it's kind of hard to get that much leverage when you're the tallest guy on the line potentially. Right.
Yeah. There was a comment in the YouTube chat earlier about, it was kind of tongue in cheek about, let's move Whitworth to center. And if you can imagine a 6'7", 330-pound center, that's not, that's not really normal protocol in the NFL. You know what, Scott, I know we want to get out of here, but there was one more really good question in the chat, and it's from Chris Dill. Would you take a chance on cornerback Justin Gilbert? Obviously, he was a top 10 pick for the Browns, fizzled out there, was, I believe, traded to the Steelers, and they just released him. Now, given the issues that we've constantly chronicled with Kirkpatrick and Jones here, is that a guy? Now, granted, you don't want to obviously say, hey, Justin Gilbert's going to be our starting corner or number 3 corner, but maybe a bottom of the roster guy that you can maybe say, hey, we can develop you into the talent we think you are. Obviously, there's a lot of measurables and things like that scouts drooled over with him. I don't know. I have my hesitations, but this also very much seems like a Bengals-like free agency move former high pick. They can get on the cheap and try and develop low risk, potentially high reward. What do you think?
I'd say yes for two reasons. One, after all the players the Browns have taken from us over the years, we mentioned Eric Steinbach earlier, Andrew Hawkins, Frosty Rucker, et cetera, it'd be nice to take one of their players. And like I said, obviously he was not with the team for all this year. He ended up with the Steelers. But I think the one advantage he would have here versus the teams he has been at in his career so far is we don't need him. He's a kind of a luxury. He's a guy you can sign to a very minimum, prove it deal. Here's a 1-year league minimum contract. It's better than bagging groceries or whatever. I don't know what else he'd be doing. But if you look at the alternatives, hey, we're going to give you this. We don't really need you. We have, although depends on what happens with Kirkpatrick, but in theory, you have Josh Shaw, possibly Dre Kirkpatrick, Dirkwise Denard, William Jackson III. So he's a guy that, you bring in, you kind of sit him on the bench. One of the things you tend to hear about the Bengals that I would hope is true is that they seem to have a pretty good, strong locker room, strong leaders. They don't take a lot of crap from players. That if he comes in, if he's lazy, not paying attention, has no interest, they could say, okay, you're gone. We're not really out anything. It was a cheap deal, probably very few guarantees. And it's not like they're so desperate at cornerback they have to keep him, have to play him. They obviously have other options. But it kind of reminds me of some of the things I've done before. They've had other high picks who have fizzled, who they've brought in. There's a couple of defensive ends. Derek Harvey, guy who was drafted by the Jaguars. I think they brought him in one summer, tried him out for a couple of weeks. I think DeMontre Moore was a guy out of Texas A&M who was a higher pick. They brought him in for a try and kind of let him go. There's another guy, I think it was from LSU, and it's going to drive me crazy what his name was, but kind of a similar situation. He was a higher pick, highly regarded, didn't work out. They brought him in for a while, tried him out for a month or two.
Jamal Anderson?
Yeah, well, okay, he was another one. There's another guy. Whoever he is.
Sam Montgomery. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, Sam Montgomery.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so they have a track record to bring guys in like that. Taylor Mays, he's seventh round, or they got him for a seventh rounder. He was a high pick, got some playing time. I think Terrence Newman was mentioned. Obviously, he was a lot older and much more productive. But yeah, I mean, this is the kind of thing they look for: is who are these very cheap, very good bargains that we can bring in and just see what happens. And if it turns out that this guy turns it on and wants to play in the NFL, you have at the very least, a backup or a special teamer, and at the very most, you could have a guy that could even be your Dre Kirkpatrick replacement, heaven forbid, or a guy who is at least out there contributing on defensive snaps somewhere.
Yep, and this I agree with you. This makes sense in a couple of respects for the Bengals, not only because of the track record. I mean, the list of former high picks that they've brought in, that they've tried to, make into reclamation projects. The list is just immense. I mean, you look at, besides all the names you listed, there's also Tank Johnson, there's Cedric Benson, there's Larry Johnson. I mean, the list is just immense. And sometimes it has worked out very well for the team. Sometimes it's worked out, even if temporarily, hey, that was an okay little pickup. It was cheap, and the guy gave us a couple plays, and that was great. Other times it has not done well. Even if it was a cheap deal, they either didn't make the roster or, there's a litany of names that we can list off in that respect as well. The other facet that makes sense with Justin Gilbert to the Bengals is they love either by their own drafting or another team's drafting. They love first-round secondary players. They love. I mean, granted, the two safeties they have now are not, but they had Reggie Nelson, a former first-round player, in the secondary. They had, you mentioned Newman, who was a former first-round player, Kirkpatrick, Adam Jones, Darqueze Dennard. They've got William Jackson III. They love these first-round players in the secondary, and Gilbert would be another one. Now, I don't know if he necessarily fits their defensive scheme, but he's got immense athleticism, and that he could be had for cheap, and it just totally seems like a Bengals signing. My one concern, and Scott, if you were on Twitter, you would have seen this. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Joe Thomas. Yeah, Joe Thomas, obviously future Hall of Fame tackle for the Browns, caught wind of the Steelers releasing Gilbert, and he made some sort of comment as well. This is the pattern that occurs. I don't have the exact quote in front of me. Basically, this is the pattern that occurs with a player that doesn't love football. So that's a little concerning, to say the least. And obviously that wouldn't bode well for the team getting a good dividend from a guy like Gilbert. But, it would be a low risk, high reward type of deal. And I think most fans would be for it. And, it wouldn't really cost the team that much money, I don't think. But great question, Chris. Appreciate it. Thank you all for tuning in live via Cincy Jungle and YouTube. You can find all of our content on both of those websites. You can also download our audio content on SoundCloud. All of our video content is on our YouTube channel. Please check that out. We're also available for download on iTunes. You can get in touch with the show at Bengals OBI on Twitter and the obinsider@gmail.com with any feedback and questions, anything like that you may want answered on the air. We appreciate all of the support. We appreciate you tuning in, and we will see you next week. Hoo day.